So this is part 2 of chapter 1, planning and scoping penetration test. During the engagement of the penetration test, it is possible that sensitive information may be discovered by the penetration testing team. It is very important that the client should prepare a legal documentation which includes confidentiality provisions within the engagement plan. This is to ensure that the information discovered by the pen tester will not be shared with other, say, with the customer, with other organizations, right? Next, um, uh, during the planning stage, there are definitely known or expected discoveries by the pen tester, but not all. Uh, Take note that it is possible with having a comprehensive penetration testing activity is that there may be discoveries by the penetration testing in terms especially on the vulnerabilities um, of the organization. So it is expected that during this penetration testing, the organization, the company might alter the statement of work, the requirements, okay, of the penetration tester on what the penetration tester will do. Because then again, take note that the main focus of the penetration testing is to work on with the discovered uh, the so-called unknown vulnerabilities detected during the penetration testing activity. Budget is one major consideration in the penetration testing. Services provided, take note that services must be services, these penetration testing services must be worth the money that is spent. Okay, so that's why very important to consider in budgeting, minimize expenses of testing, find ways to minimize expenses of testing and maximize the revenue, and provide acceptable quality of service to the client. Okay, so there are different means that the penetration tester may look into to in order to minimize expenses. Maybe like um, use freeware, no, the um, ability of the penetration tester to know available freeware tools. It would be helpful to minimize expenses on the penetration testing to be conducted. Very important also to identify technical constraints. Okay, so what are those that are to be tested in the infrastructure of the organization? What is not to be tested should be well identified. What cannot be tested? You also have to consider the budgetary conditions. And then rules of engagement. Okay. The way we define rules of engagement are these are document or sections of a document which outlines how the penetration testing is to be conducted. So I have here components inside a rules of engagement. First to consider is the timeline. No, better to create a Gantt chart. Like I think most of you are into methods of research. You will be taught there how to create a Gantt chart and identify components inside in a Gantt chart. Another is to identify the location where the test team is in relation to the client's properties or to those devices that are going to be tested. Um, Also, in the rules of engagement, very important to consider temporal restrictions. Okay, that let's say maybe there are servers that cannot be tested during working hours or during operation. So uh, this with these kinds of devices, with these kinds of conditions in the devices, testing may be done midnight, like or after office hours. Transparency, um, what client personnel are in the know. Okay, like I think we mentioned this before. Example, if you were to consider social engineering tactics, very important that the staff do not know that there will be penetration testing to be conducted, and then test boundaries, what gets tested, acceptable social engineering tests, and restriction on invasive attacks are to be identified under here the rules of engagement. Very important to estimate the effect of the penetration testing on normal business operation. Okay, like identify its potential impact in terms of the target type, criticality, and testing approach. Also, very important to consider the analyst or the penetration tester lead team should consider in its analysis unforeseen impacts, okay, how will it will treat unforeseen impacts. And also, one factor again in penetration testing is the risk management and prioritization of the pen test results. There are different approach for us to that can help us identify what needs to be prioritized on those vulnerabilities detected during the penetration testing. Remediation timeline is the implementation of a solution for a given vulnerability. So very important here to identify. This is the guide to, in order for the organization to identify what needs to be prioritized. Okay, for example, an organization may consider those that are of highest risk issues first. Okay, or maybe the factor is the cost. They may prioritize first those that can be resolved the cheapest. So these are things to consider under remediation timeline. To add a clause during in the pen test results, it would be helpful. So these are under disclaimers. Examples of disclaimers are, say, the results, the pen test results, should not be interpreted as a security guarantee. It doesn't guarantee that. Another disclaimer may be, uh, if the organization changes something in the configuration of their infrastructure, it can cause the pen test result to be outdated. Okay. So very important to add disclaimers in the penetration testing report to be sent to the organization or the company. I have here a list of guidelines for planning penetration testing engagement. First is, again, be sure that you understand your target user. Another is to identify resources and requirements that will govern, facilitate the penetration testing engagement. Another also thing to consider is the budget restriction and the technical constraints, which we mentioned a while ago. The rules of engagement are clearly defined. Also identifying and developing the impact analysis and remediation timeline, and also do not forget to add a disclaimer. The scope of the penetration testing work is the most crucial thing to negotiate in the contract. Very important that the scope is very clearly discussed, okay, to all stakeholders, the client, the penetration testing team, okay. Very important that it is well understood, um, and also very important to identify the limits of the what the pen test team can do to the target are identified, clearly identified. Okay. The penetration testing team members should know the protocol to follow when they encounter something that is out of scope.